So in Module 3, as I said, we're going to move from dating in adolescence and talk about the type of love that you can see in adolescence, emerging adulthood, and actually even into further adulthood. And we're going to look at Sternberg and his theory of love and its various components. So let's look at that. So here is Sternberg's theory of love. And what he said is that there are different types of love, and they involve combining three kind of fundamental qualities of love in different ways. And the three qualities include passion, and passion involves the physical attraction, sexual desire. As you can imagine, this is going to be very evident early on in relationships. Emotional as well as physical, and it may involve very intense emotions. It's like anxiety, delight, anger, jealousy. All of that's going to be kind of wrapped up in passion. Now, if we have just passion in a relationship and nothing else, this is oftentimes called infatuation. And you see infatuation at particularly high rates during adolescence. So this is just passion alone, and it involves obviously a great deal of physiological and emotional arousal, heightened levels of sexual desire, but there's no emotional closeness to the person or any sort of enduring commitment. So we just refer to that as infatuation. Intimacy, what we see here are feelings of closeness and emotional attachment. Now, this is not going to usually involve or have to involve physical contact like you would see with passion. That doesn't mean that it can't come if you combine a little bit of passion to that. But in general, that feelings of closeness and emotional attachment, really that prominence grows throughout adolescence and relationships and then into emerging adulthood. So this is a level of that kind of psychological intimacy and not so much the just physical kind of passions that are aroused. And some of the characteristics that we see in this intimacy is ideas of mutual understanding and mutual support, open communication about issues that you don't discuss with anyone else. So it really gets into these things like best friends. And not coincidentally, if you just have intimacy component, you don't have the passion or the other one, this is what we call liking. So it's can be characterized with most friendships. So you can have intimacy with a friend that doesn't involve any sort of sexual relationship, but it's really that kind of idea that you're in it together. And all of you have probably had very good friends or very close romantic partners that fall into this intimacy category, that you feel comfortable enough disclosing all the sorts of things that kind of are rummaging around your head, but that you may feel uncomfortable disclosing to most other people. And then the last of the three different fundamental qualities is commitment. And when you see commitment, this is a pledge to love someone over the long run. That means through the ups and downs, and often part of love. So love is not a constant, it does fluctuate. And the commitment is really what sustains long-term relationships through the various fluctuations that we see in passion and intimacy over time. Now, if you just have commitment with no intimacy or passion, that's referred to as empty love and just the commitment alone. And this may apply to a couple who've maybe been married many, many years. They've kind of lost the passion and intimacy, but they're still together. You may also see this in arranged marriages where there never really was the passion or intimacy, just the commitment part of it. And we refer to that as empty love. Now, not surprisingly, adolescent love relationships, commitment is usually missing or highly tentative, and you wouldn't expect that to be. Usually you don't see the commitment until emerging adulthood, and that's when they start talking about longer term relationships and making a pledge to keep that relationship going through things like marriage. Most adolescent relationships, on the other hand, last only a few weeks or months, so we're not really holding our breath for that to continue. Now, there are other types of love depending on how you combine the three basics. So we've already talked about the passion alone, which is infatuation, the intimacy alone, which is liking, and the commitment alone, which is empty love. So let's look at some of the ones when you have them combined. And the one that most people think of when they say I'm in love, and that can involve adolescence too, is the combining of passion and intimacy to form what they call romantic love. And it is usually very intense and joyful, but barely last long. This is the stage where all your thoughts are consumed by the other individual, that you just can't imagine thinking of anything else. And you just totally in cloud nine, just nothing else matters. Okay, that's romantic love. And it's great feeling when you're in it, but obviously is not a long-term sort of feeling. Probably a good thing too, because usually when you're in that state, you're not much good for anything else because you've kind of totally focused on that other person and the feelings that you have for them. Now, you see, if you have intimacy and commitment, but not necessarily passionate, you're going to have the companionate type of love. Okay? And this could be applied to unusually close friendships as well as close family relationships, in addition to romantic relationships. Okay, so the commitment and intimacy can be obtained. That type of love can be obtained other ways than in a sexual kind of romantic relationship, but rather one that just really has a big depth of those feelings and commitment to one another. And that's companionate. And then you can see fatuous love is a combination of passion and commitment. And this is when usually you talk about whirlwind relationships. You know, you fall hard for somebody and then you go get married. This would be kind of your classic Las Vegas relationship where you meet somebody and in a matter of days get married. And that's the passion and commitment. But obviously the intimacy has not had any time to really develop. And then finally, you get the triumvirate, what we call consummate love, which is the combination and integration of all three fundamental components: intimacy, passion, and commitment. Now, this is hard to sustain because typically the passion is the one that's going to be likely to fade. But that is the type that most people aspire to, and maybe the most ideal form of love. Okay, so those are kind of the ideas, and it's a good one to kind of conceptualize because relationships go through these different types of love. And the longer you're together, usually you see the passion kind of fade. You may see the intimacy fade too, to some degree, or you see the commitment fade, and you see things like divorce. Okay, so you can see how these combine in different ways. Here is just kind of a breakdown. I like to include this particular graph just so because it can be confusing to remember what types of love line up with which of the three fundamental characteristics. So applying this to adolescence, most adolescent love relationships, as I was mentioning, commitment's really not there very much. The long-term commitment usually means that it's either infatuation or romantic love. So infatuation, once again, was just pure passion, and the romantic love is that combination of passion and intimacy. In industrialized societies, what we see is people are not likely to get married until their mid to late 20s. And so because that's the standard, you understand why commitment is really not a focus of relationships for adolescents, because society says, you're no pressure. You don't have to commit already. Go ahead and take your time. And so that's what individuals do. Not surprising. All right. What about falling in love? One of the things, and the primary thing that we're looking for, is this idea of consensual validation. And basically what this says is, people like to find others that agree or have a consensus with our own characteristics. Now, that should sound familiar because that's how we pick our friends too, by and large. So by finding a consensus, that somebody who supports or validates our own way of looking at the world, we find that attractive and things that we want to be around that person more. So some of these characteristics that you're going to see are similar intelligence levels, social class, your ethnic background, your religious beliefs, and then also physical attractiveness. So people tend to get into relationships with people who have similarity to them on these type of characteristics. Now, it doesn't have to be all of those characteristics. Some could be missing if all the others are a good match, but you do see that. And of course, we've talked about this in our class before as far as the way that we form friendships. We want to be around people who are similar to us, who get us, who provide that consensual validation. So we're going to explore a little bit more about adolescent love in Module 4. So go ahead and stay tuned for that one.